My name's John Willman and I'm one of the editors of the London Summit website. I'm here today, shortly after the London Summit is finished, to ask David Miliband, the Foreign Secretary, what he feels has been achieved. Foreign Secretary, give us a big picture view of what you think has been achieved by this summit.
Well, the summit finished about an hour ago, and I think the important news is not just that there is an agreement, but that it has real substance behind it on the key issues on macroeconomic coordination, on financial regulation, on trade and anti-protectionism, and on help for developing countries. I think the world is in a better place now than it was yesterday. That doesn't mean that all the problems have been solved today that were still to be solved yesterday, but it does mean that there are a very clear set of commitments that will help pull the world back from the financial and economic crisis that it's been suffering. That is obviously a tribute to all of the leaders who took part in the summit, who came here with a real sense and commitment to deliver a real response to this unprecedented crisis, and we're obviously very pleased.
Will there be another summit?
There's now a commitment to take this process forward. I think that's significant in two respects. First, the measures that have been agreed need to be properly implemented, and this is a group of leaders that want to make sure that they are implemented. Secondly, one of the underlying causes of this crisis has been the imbalance in political institutions and the lack of international economic institutions that are representative of the modern world economy. And so the commitment of the G20 to make the new multilateralism live on is, I think, significant. The G20 is not a substitute for the United Nations, it's not a substitute for regional groupings, but it's establishing itself at heads of government level as a very important forum for taking on and filling the gap that exists in international economic governance.
And what does the success of this summit mean for future events, for example, the Copenhagen Climate Change Summit in December?
I think that at the end of last year, with the collapse of the Doha trade round, there was a real crisis of multilateralism. This G20 process is in part a response to that. It's an assertion that the world doesn't have such divergent interests that it can't come together. It's a determination to create a structure, in this case a relatively ad hoc structure, that can breathe new life and new confidence into the multilateral system. Now, the Copenhagen climate change talks in December, not just talks, but negotiations and hopefully discussion, are a real test of that multilateral system. It's a very, very complex set of negotiations. But I think that there's a clear pointer from the heads of government today in respect of the low-carbon recovery, that they know that a sustainable recovery must be a low-carbon recovery, and that requires a successful Copenhagen talks and decisions in December.
Is the G20 now a permanent organisation after the success of the London Summit?
I think it remains to be seen. What's clear is that the times that we live in cannot afford a collapse of the G20. We need the G20 because the G8 isn't representative enough or powerful enough or effective enough. And so the G20 carries on, and it proves its worth through events and decisions like those taken today, but also through the follow-through, and it's the implementation that counts.
The leaders are all going home now. What's the next test for them after the success of this summit?
Well, there are obviously, the biggest challenge in politics is to respond to changing circumstances. And this is a very dynamic economic crisis. The length and depth and breadth of it today is not the same as it was 3 months ago or 6 months ago. And so as time goes by, they need to retain a flexibility and an agility. But the biggest test is to make sure that the confidence that comes from the agreement that's come today needs to be translated into practical change in the international systems and in the national actions that are going to be very important in the months ahead.
Now, Foreign Secretary, around this summit, you've organised an amazing campaign of public diplomacy to reach out across the world to generate interest and support for the London Summit. Do you think this has been a success?
Well, I'm sure that you can't solve global problems through governments alone. You need businesses and you need civilians, citizens as well. The fact that 400,000 people should have visited this London Summit website is very gratifying. I hope that number continues to rise as people debate the results of the G20 process. But I think there is a global political conversation now, and that's a very significant thing. I think the leaders who've come here have all been very cognizant of the fact that their own media has been covering this in detail. They've all come with aspirations and ambitions for the G20, and I hope that this sort of new diplomacy that's conducted on the web rather than in secret rooms is going to continue.
Foreign Secretary, people often describe the Foreign Office as being a rather stuffy organisation, and will be rather surprised to find you've done quite so much online for the London Summit. Why does the Foreign Office want to do so much digitally?
I think that if I talk to my fellow foreign ministers around the world, they say that the British Foreign Office is rather ahead of the game on some of this digital diplomacy. I think it's just a fact of the modern world that if you want to get anything done, you need more than government agreements. You need popular engagement and popular mobilization. And in the end, the essence of the economic crisis is about confidence. And confidence isn't just a matter for leaders. Confidence is a matter for people and for business people, citizens and business people around the world, market makers around the world, but also consumers around the world. And so I think it's right that we recognize in everything we do, whether it be on the nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament agenda, whether it be on the European enlargement agenda, whether it be on the big conflicts around the world, whether it be on the need to share the resources of the world, of the earth better. Those are all things where diplomats gain from talking to people and from opening themselves up to question and comment.
Foreign Secretary, thank you very much.